The god didn't fear us, it feared him. I survived. I realize now that survival and success are not remotely the same thing. Looking back, I should have taken the angel's concern more seriously. You know the god?
Yes.
That was not reassuring, not even slightly. The angel looked at the church the way someone might look at a former coworker they absolutely hated.
That is unfortunate.
I stared at him. What does that mean? He went quiet for several moments before smiling, and somehow, that was even worse.
It means your chances of survival have decreased significantly.
Nobody laughed. The angel seemed genuinely confused by this reaction. Then, he raised one hand and pointed toward the church.
It is one of the gods that believed it could imprison me.
For the first time since Antarctica, genuine excitement entered his voice. The smile on his face widened, and widened, and widened, until it stretched from ear to ear. Several security officers instinctively stepped backward. I couldn't blame them. The expression wasn't human. It wasn't even close. "Why are you smiling?" I asked. Honestly, I just wanted him to stop. The angel's eyes remained fixed on the church.
Do you believe in heaven?
I blinked. "What?"
Heaven.
he repeated.
Do you humans go there after death?
I stared at him. I had no idea why he was asking that. Maybe it was because we were standing in front of a church, or because he didn't think we were going to survive. Then again, most of what he did made absolutely no sense. At least not to humans. "Why would I?" I asked. The angel blinked.
Why would you not?
I shrugged. All the gods I've met live on Earth. If they're here, who's in heaven? To my surprise, the angel laughed. Not loudly, just enough to make me immediately uncomfortable.
You are intelligent.
He said. I've been told otherwise. His smile widened slightly. How far can his face actually stretch?
If humans do not go to heaven, where do you think souls go when they die?
I thought about it for a moment. The honest answer wasn't particularly complicated. I don't know. The angel waited. If I had to guess, somewhere maybe. That's usually how religions explain it. I had never been particularly religious, much to my parents' disappointment. The angel tilted his head.
They do not.
I frowned. What?
When humans die, their souls dissipate and cease to exist.
He said it with the same tone someone might use to discuss the weather. Suddenly, everything felt very quiet. I stared at him. The angel stared back. Around us, security teams prepared equipment, checked weapons, and finalized entry plans, completely unaware that the angel had just casually informed me that the afterlife wasn't real. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, I shrugged. Okay. The angel blinked.
Okay?
Yeah.
You do not seem upset.
Should I be? The angel studied me carefully.
Most humans react poorly to that information.
I was genuinely too tired for this conversation. Why?
Because they fear death.
That sounds like a future me problem. The angel stared. I continued. If I'm dead, I really can't do anything about it. The silence stretched. Slowly, the angel leaned forward. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked genuinely baffled.
You are remarkably unconcerned about your own mortality, despite repeatedly surviving situations that should kill you.
I shrugged. Being concerned about death won't stop death. Everyone dies eventually. The angel continued staring at me. I had the distinct feeling I'd given the wrong answer. Or possibly the most interesting answer. Unfortunately, with him, those were usually the same thing. Finally, the preparations were complete. We made our way toward the church entrance while security teams established positions around the building. After a brief discussion that mostly consisted of people arguing over who had to go in first, the security personnel breached the doors. The moment they swung open, every conversation died. The church was bigger, much bigger. Not slightly bigger or architecturally impressive bigger. Impossible bigger. The interior stretched far beyond what the exterior dimensions should have allowed. Rows upon rows of pews extended into the distance, disappearing into a dim golden haze. Hundreds of civilians filled those seats. Then I realized it wasn't hundreds. It was thousands. Every missing resident was there. 5,000 people sat perfectly still in neat rows as if a church service was underway. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. They simply stared forward with peaceful expressions on their faces. The sight would have been comforting if it weren't so deeply wrong. At the far end of the impossible sanctuary stood a massive figure. At first, I thought it was a statue. Then, it moved. The thing towered over the congregation, its body partially fused into the floor beneath it. Thick roots, or maybe veins, spread outward from its lower half, disappearing through the stone as if the church itself had grown around it. Its head resembled that of a goat, crowned with twisting horns, while its body was covered in dark feathers like some grotesque bird. Human hands protruded from the masses of feathers, pressed together in prayer. The entire thing looked wrong. Not horrifying in the traditional sense, just bizarre in a way that made my brain struggle to process what it was seeing. Its enormous hands remained clasped together as thousands of worshippers mirrored the pose. Every missing resident knelt in perfect silence, staring toward the thing at the front of the church. Thousands of people praying. Thousands of people worshipping. And at the center of it all sat a god.
Why are you here, human?
Its voice echoed through the sanctuary despite the fact it hadn't raised it. 5,000 heads remained perfectly still. I stepped forward before anyone else could. We have a proposition. Humans are going to notice that an entire city disappeared. We can help you keep your current worshippers, but you need to cooperate. The god tilted its head.
Or?
I sighed. Please understand, if the government discovers what's happening here, they'll eventually respond by removing the problem. That wasn't technically true. The government wasn't the problem. We were. C.S.P. generally handled situations like this. If a god refused our agreements, we didn't negotiate forever. We erased the problem from the map. The god's expression darkened.
Remove.
They wiped the entire location off the map. A long silence followed. Then the god blinked.
I see.
Surprisingly, it didn't seem particularly concerned. Its gaze drifted past me, past the security teams, past the researchers, past everyone. Then it froze. The change was immediate. Its pupils widened. The feathers along its body puffed outward. For the first time since we'd entered the church, the god looked genuinely afraid.
Wait. Is that?
A voice answered before I could.
Yes, it's me.
The angel stepped forward. For the first time since entering the church, the congregation reacted. Thousands of worshippers shifted uneasily. The god stared. The angel stared back. Recognition flashed across both their faces. Then, the god's expression twisted into horror. Unfortunately, the god recognized that smile.
And I remember you.
The angel's grin widened. The smile on his face was entirely wrong for the situation. The god recoiled. For a moment, I forgot that I was looking at a god. Fear is a remarkably universal expression, and whatever history existed between these two, the god wanted absolutely no part of it. The deity surged to its feet. Roots tore free from the stone floor with sounds like breaking bones as it rose to its full height.
What have you done, you fools? You led him here?
The entire church shook. Thousands of worshippers suddenly stood all at once. 5,000 people moved in perfect synchronization. My stomach dropped. Oh, this is bad. The crowd surged toward us. Security personnel immediately formed defensive layers around the negotiators, researchers, and medical teams. Training took over. Orders were shouted. Rifles came up. Then, the first wave hit. Gunfire erupted throughout the church. The sound was deafening. Hundreds of rifles opened fire simultaneously as the congregation rushed forward like a living tidal wave. Bullets tore through pews and shattered stained glass windows. People screamed. Radios exploded with overlapping orders. The worshippers didn't stop. They just kept coming. And through all of it, the angel stood there, smiling at the god, like he'd finally found something interesting. None of this mattered anymore. The mission had changed. Negotiation was over. Containment was over. Now we were moving to demolition. I pushed through the chaos toward the altar, clutching the demolition charge against my chest. The device wasn't much larger than a backpack, but it carried enough firepower to bring down a building if placed correctly. Unfortunately, there were several thousand extremely motivated civilians between me and where I needed to put it. I shot at the civilians. I'm not proud of that. I'm also not dead. Unfortunately, those were the only two options available at the time. Security personnel fought desperately to hold the crowd back while I slipped through gaps in the fighting. A woman grabbed my arm. I fired. A man lunged at me from between the pews. I fired again. Someone tackled one of our researchers to the floor and I fired a third time. I didn't stop moving. Stopping was how you died. By the time I reached the front rows, my ears were ringing from the gunfire and my lungs felt like they were on fire. The air smelled of smoke, blood, and burning gunpowder. The god saw me immediately. Of course it did. Its massive head turned toward me as I sprinted between shattered pews. Around us, gunfire echoed through the impossible sanctuary, while thousands of worshippers surged against the defensive line. Somewhere behind me, security teams were still trying to prevent the situation from becoming even worse. They were failing. The charge suddenly felt very small, and the god suddenly felt very large. Behind me, security teams were buying time with bullets. Ahead of me sat an angry deity, and somewhere to my left, the angel was laughing. Not helping, just laughing, which somehow made the situation even worse. I reached the base of the altar and dropped to one knee. My hands were already moving, pulling the charge free, arming it, and setting the timer. For one glorious second, I thought I might actually pull this off. Then the god moved. One moment, it was 20 feet away. The next, a massive hand filled my vision. I threw myself sideways. The hand slammed into the floor where I had been standing. The impact sounded like a car crash. Stone exploded outward as the shockwave hit me like a truck. I lost my footing and flew across the sanctuary. The last thing I saw before impact was the demolition charge sliding from my hands. Then I hit a wall. Hard. The stone cracked around me. Something inside my shoulder made a noise shoulders aren't supposed to make. For several seconds, I couldn't breathe. I slid to the floor in a shower of dust and broken masonry, while pain shot through every part of my body. Everything rang. My ears, my head, my teeth, the entire world. Through blurred vision, I spotted the charge lying near the god's roots. Still armed, still ticking. The god saw it too. Eat dirt, I muttered. Then the explosive detonated. The blast lit up the sanctuary like a second sun. The shockwave ripped through the church. Stone pillars shattered. Stained glass vaporized. Entire sections of the floor erupted upward. The god let out a sound somewhere between a scream and a roar, as fire engulfed the altar. Then, gravity remembered its job. The ceiling began to collapse. Chunks of stone the size of cars tore free overhead. Cracks raced along the impossible sanctuary as the entire structure groaned around us. People screamed. The remaining worshippers scattered. Security teams threw themselves behind whatever cover they could find. I managed exactly one thought. Is this how it ends? Then several tons of debris came crashing down on top of me. Everything vanished in a flash of white. For a moment, I was certain I was dead. Then I opened my eyes. I was standing in the middle of a field. Tall grass stretched endlessly toward the horizon, and above me, the sky shimmered gold and silver, filled with stars that drifted across the heavens far too quickly to belong to any real night. There was no church, no gunfire, and no screaming. There was only silence and the god. The goat-headed deity stood several yards away, motionless among the grass. Its enormous form seemed different somehow, less solid, less real. as though I was looking at a reflection instead of the thing itself. I stared at it, looked around, then looked back at it. What the? The god inclined its head.
Hello, human.
The deity's feathers rustled despite the absence of wind.
You stand at the edge of a doorway. Your body remains outstretched.
That explained absolutely nothing. Am I dead?
No.
Oh. The god seemed disappointed by how calmly I accepted that answer. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Then it stepped closer.
You travel beside a dangerous thing.
I immediately knew who it meant. The angel? The god's expression darkened. I waited, and eventually it spoke again.
When the first voice shaped the world, every star, every god, and every living thing was given a name.
I frowned. Okay.
Most names are forgotten.
Its gaze settled upon me.
Some should remain forgotten.
The grass bent around us as though something vast had shifted beneath the earth. Then the god recited.
Before the throne and before the skies, before the first stars learned to fly, a voice bestows both fate and seal, a word no servant may repeal. Find out that and make it real, and even heaven's house must kneel.
The field fell silent. I waited. The god waited. What does that mean? The deity blinked.
The one you call Angel wears many names, but only one was given.
Something about the way it was said made my stomach tighten. The stars above began to fracture as thin cracks spread across the sky. The field around us started to dissolve, and the god's voice echoed through the growing darkness.
Find the name spoken by its creator, and even the oldest servant must listen.
The world split apart around us. I stared at the deity. Why are you helping me? For the first time, the god hesitated. The cracks widened and the grass dissolved into drifting fragments of light before it finally answered.
Because I remember what it was before it was given a purpose.
The field shook beneath us. The god's eyes remained fixed on mine.
And because some things should never be allowed power.
The world shattered. The last thing I saw was the goat-headed deity staring directly at me before everything went dark. For a brief, glorious moment, there was nothing. No pain, no collapsing church, no angry gods, and no angel. Then, consciousness returned, immediately followed by regret. I opened my eyes to the familiar sight of a hospital ceiling. Unfortunately, there was also a face approximately 6 inches from mine. At this point, I was beginning to suspect the angel simply materialized next to unconscious people for entertainment.
Oh,
He said.
you survived.
I stared at him. The angel stared back. Neither of us spoke for several seconds before I finally sighed. Can you stop doing that?
Doing what?
He leaned back slightly. Not enough. My head was ringing, my vision was blurry, and every part of my body hurt. Breathing hurt, thinking hurt, existing hurt. The angel tilted his head.
Are all humans this weak, or are you the exception?
I closed my eyes. Good morning to you too. He was silent for a moment before speaking again.
Why are you like this?
I opened one eye. Why are you this interested in me? The question came out more annoyed than intended. Then again, nearly dying probably gave a person the confidence to ask questions they normally wouldn't. The angel considered it.
You repeatedly place yourself in situations that should result in your death, despite possessing remarkably poor instincts.
The room remained silent. I waited. Eventually, he continued.
You are very fragile. Yet, you continue succeeding. I find this unusually entertaining.
Of course he did. I'm writing this from my hospital bed now. According to the doctors, I suffered a concussion, a dislocated shoulder, 3 fractured ribs, and enough bruising to qualify as modern art. Apparently, getting buried beneath several tons of collapsing cement isn't recommended for long-term health. The angel is currently sitting across the room. For once, he isn't staring at me. Instead, he's staring out the window, and I have no idea why. A few minutes ago, he informed me that he intends to accompany me on future missions. Apparently, this was not a request. Normally, that would be the most concerning thing to happen all day. Instead, I kept thinking about what the god told me. The warning, the name, and the fear in its voice. The god wasn't afraid of us. It wasn't afraid of our weapons. It wasn't afraid of being blown apart. It was afraid of the angel. That should probably bother me more than it does. But what bothered me instead was something else. When I first met the angel, he felt completely alien. Not hostile, not friendly, just distant, like a force of nature pretending to be a person. Now, I'm not so sure. A few weeks ago, he wouldn't have understood sarcasm. Now, he uses it. Poorly, but he tries. When I first met him, he never asked questions. Now, he asks them constantly. Most of them are deeply concerning, but they're still questions. The strangest part is that I think he started lying. Not well and not often, but I've caught him doing it. Tiny things. Claiming he wasn't curious about something immediately before asking 27 follow-up questions. Insisting he doesn't care what people do before getting visibly annoyed when Jacob injured me. Pretending he wasn't waiting outside my hospital room after being told visitors weren't allowed. The lies are obvious. The fact that he tells them at all is not. The angel claims he does not experience human emotions. I believed him. Now, I'm beginning to suspect he's trying to. I don't know why that possibility unsettles me. Maybe because I've met plenty of monsters pretending to be gods. Or maybe it's because the angel has started looking less like a force of nature and more like a person. If something older than time itself is learning how to be human, I have absolutely no idea what happens next. Humans learn to trust each other eventually though, and if he learns to trust, maybe one day he'll tell me his name. That thought should have been comforting. Instead, it terrified me. A dark possibility entered my mind. If the angel ever trusted me enough to give me his name, I knew exactly what I would do with it. I'd tell myself it was for humanity. I'd tell myself it was a safeguard, a weapon of last resort, something to use only if he ever became a threat. But deep down, I knew the truth. I'd keep it because I'd finally have leverage over something stronger than me. For the first time in my life, I wouldn't be the fragile one in the room. The realization made my stomach turn. The god warned me that some things should never be allowed to have power. Looking at the angel now, I'm starting to think it wasn't talking about him. I think it was talking about me. The angel just asked why I was smiling at him. I wasn't aware I was. Considering I've spent the last 10 minutes figuring out how to blackmail an entity older than civilization, that's probably not a great sign. Anyway, if I don't update this journal again, I've either completed my mandatory counseling, or I'm having another terrible day babysitting an entity older than time itself for an organization that shouldn't exist. Some stories end when the words stop. Others don't end at all. If you enjoyed this story, there are many more waiting in the dark. Until next time.